Welcome to another edition of Rank the Movies. I am Martin Prevost. Thank you for clicking on this video. This week, well, we've talked about DC live action movies. We've talked about Batman animated movies. So I thought this week, we'd look at the rest of the DC animated library and see what the best movies are there. DC releases some great animated films. Their live action movies are subpar for most, but their animated game is on point. And they've been releasing them for a while now. I think they just celebrated about their 15th year anniversary with releasing animated movies on the regular. They had a couple before that, obviously. So we're going to look at that entire library minus the Batman films, because we gave him his own list. And we're going to take a look at what is the best. So let's get started with our honorable mention. All-Stars Superman. Based on the graphic novel of the same name. Basically, Superman is forced to fly into the sun to save some astronauts, become super saturated by the sun's yellow light, and is beginning to die because of it. He has too much power built up in him, and he is going to die. This story kind of bounces around a lot because it's based on a graphic novel, but it's interesting to see, like, what would Superman do if he was about to die? If there was nothing he could do to stop it. It's an inevitable feat, and it's a pretty good movie. But let's move on to our primary list. Number 10, The Death and Return of Superman. Much like Batman The Dark Knight Returns, this is actually two movies called The Death of Superman and The Reign of the Supermen. But I'm putting them together because they tell one full story. And it is the death of Superman. Basically, a giant monster named Doomsday crash lands on Earth. He beats the crap out of the Justice League, minus Batman, who is able to avoid him with slight injury, and ends up fighting Superman, and they both die. Then they bury Superman, and all of a sudden, other people with powers like Superman show up. A cyborg that says he's Superman, a holographic version of Superman, a man in just a giant steel suit, and a clone. All show up and start saying that they are the real Superman, and that they are the real hero, and the movie builds until Superman finally, inevitably returns to save the day and crush the villain, which is one of the four Supermen. And you learn that two of them aren't villains and one of them is actually helping the real Superman. It's a good movie. Check it out. It's definitely worth it. I'm not a huge Superman fan, but this was a very well done movie. Number 9, Superman Doomsday. Now, when I mentioned when they first started making animated films, this was it. This is where they started. There's no plot to go over here, because I literally just went over the plot in the last movie. This is the first telling that they did of the death of Superman in his fight with Doomsday. This one does move forward. It kind of tries to string together a lot of the elements of both the death of Superman and the reign of the Superman. Obviously, this one did come first. It's a good story, and it's where it started. Without this, the rest of the DC animated movies might not have been made. And it's a good movie. It is definitely worth checking out. Alright, number 8, Justice League War. This is a formation story for the Justice League as they come together to fight Darkseid, the evil denizen leader of the planet Apocalypse. It is a fun movie. You get Batman and Green Lantern with some great banter going on. Shazam is in it, so you get that kid Billy Batson who turns into Shazam. Cyborg, who's just figuring out how he is Cyborg. It is a great Justice League movie, and they really do come together nicely. This did start off their much bigger animated universe that they did of movies. Some of them are really good, some of them are bad. And that's just kind of how those movies go. This is a really good start, and it's a really good movie. Number 7, Justice League Crisis on Two Earths. Basically, Lex Luthor from a parallel dimension comes to the Justice League, because in his dimension, he's actually a hero. And he's asking for help from that dimension's Justice League to stop his version's crime syndicate. Because instead of these people ending up being heroes, they ended up being the villains. So Batman becomes Owlman, Superman becomes Ultraman, and so on and so forth. So the Justice League travels to the other dimension to try to put an end to the crime syndicate. Which is a very interesting thing because the main villain of this movie is Owlman, the Batman counterpart, who is trying to simply destroy everything. And I don't mean everything as in, everything in his world. I mean everything. The minute he found out there are multiple universes, he wants to destroy it all. every last universe, going all the way back to the primordial ooze that spawned it all. It basically looks at the idea of multiple universes as the idea of a simple choice. That a new universe is spawned from the various decisions we can make. So there are hundreds of thousands of them, all of which he wants to destroy. It is a great movie, it is a fun movie, and it tells a very good story. Again, based on a graphic novel, The Crisis on Two Earths. Number 6, Green Lantern, Emerald Knights. At some point in time, I'm going to talk about how much I hate the movie Batman Gotham Knight. I hate that movie. That movie is trash. If I was doing my least favorite DC animated movies, it would be a one-movie list. It would be that movie. And I would probably talk about it as long as I'm talking about all of these. Green Lantern Emerald Knight is very similar in style and tone. It is a series of shorts wrapped around a story of the Green Lantern Corps preparing to stop a giant evil threat. And it's Hal Jordan, voiced by Nathan Fillion, talking to a new Green Lantern recruit about past Green Lanterns and their accomplishments, including Sinestro, who would inevitably become a villain, Kilowog, the planet. There's actually a planet that's a Green Lantern. It is a good movie. It is a well-told series of stories, and it is done very nicely. It is definitely worth checking out. Number 5, Justice League: The New Frontier. This is based on the comic book called The New Frontier. This looks at the golden age of the Justice League. It is a modern book that takes everything back to how they looked in the golden age. So although Batman is still dark, he's not as dark. And it really looks at how these golden age heroes began. Because the golden age really started with heroes like the Flash and Green Lantern, because Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman were already around. So it's their origins and how they joined up and became heroes while stopping a threat from outer space. It is a really interesting movie and a lot of fun to watch, and it's definitely worth checking out. Number 4, Justice League Doom. This one is vaguely based on a comic book series called Tower of Babel. Basically, the Legion of Doom forms, led by Lex Luthor with... Actually, no, this one is not led by Lex Luthor. This one is led by Vandal Savage, featuring various villains of each of the heroes. And they go to attack the heroes. Except they just don't attack them in any way. They steal information from Batman's back computer that is his plans on how to stop each member of the Justice League. And they enact that so Vandal Savage can enact his final plan. It is a great movie. It is a great story. Nothing is better than the idea that at the end of the day, Batman kind of aids the villains because he has all of these emergency plans set up to deal with Superman, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Flash. He has these plans in place in case they were to go evil. And when they get used, to be used against him. And of course, they have to create a plan for Batman himself, which inevitably goes wrong because plans against Batman always go wrong. Which leads us to the villains finally getting defeated. It is a great movie. It is definitely worth checking out. Number 3, Suicide Squad: Hell to Pay. Let's pretend there was a get-out-of-jail-free card for going to hell. How many people in the mercenary and evil business are going to want this? All of them. Enter Suicide Squad. Basically, the Suicide Squad is sent out to do exactly that. To obtain an item that if you had it on you when you die, you're forgiven of everything you've done and are given free entry into heaven. Amanda Waller is dying, she wants it. Vandal Savage is dying, he wants it. Like 3 other people find out what this thing does and they want it. It is a great movie. Again, Suicide Squad, the live action version, is an awful film. This is really good. If they had done this, that would have been a great movie. But they didn't do this, they did that. They should have done this and not that. This is good. Good Suicide Squad. And it's a great mix. It's definitely the more mature idea, but you're working with villains, and it should be more mature if you're working with villains, because they're going to do more villainous crap. It is a lot of fun. Definitely check it out. Number 2, Justice League: Gods and Monsters. This isn't really based on a comic book. Comic books were made, but they were written to go with this movie. Basically, this is a what-if story. I love what-if stories. I think as a creative person, as an interested person, you can do so much with a good what-if story. This one follows the what if Superman wasn't the son of Kal-El. What if he was the son of the villain of that story, General Zod? What if Batman wasn't Bruce Wayne? He was the Man-Bat who became Batman. And what if Wonder Woman wasn't actually Princess Diana? She was one of the denizens of Apocalypse who turned on Darkseid. Enter Justice League Gods and Monsters. That's exactly what it looks at. It's a what if these things happened? How would it all be different? Because now every one of these three characters aren't the exact same. They'll be doing different things. They're not the same person. How does that change how the world views the Justice League? It is a great story. It is a very well told story. I loved it. I have the comics that go with it, and it's a very good series of comics because they're all prequel comics, kind of giving more information on these characters. It is definitely one worth checking out. Number 1, Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox, based on the comic books of Flashpoint. I love this. Is honestly, it's such a good movie. The Flash ends up going back in time, changing an event that leads to a parallel universe where Bruce Wayne is dead, Thomas Wayne isn't dead, still becomes Batman. Atlantis is at war with Paradise Island, and the world is kind of just trapped in the middle of this war of the superhumans. Superman was actually captured and locked in a dungeon, and he plays absolutely no role in this movie because he was locked in a dungeon and then freaks out and flies away. But it is such a good movie. It is such, again, this is a what-if story. What if this is how it ended up? And you find out that the villain of this whole story, the person that set this whole thing into motion. So there is a villain in this movie. His name is Reverse Flash, Professor Zoom. He has a lot of names. He is the villain of this story. But he's not the villain that set it into motion. He just happened to be in the time slip when it happened, so he remembers everything. It's the Flash. The Flash actually set this whole thing in motion. He is the actual villain of the story because he's the one that put it in motion. He created this alternate universe, and now he has to fix it by undoing what he did in the past, which was very simply saving his mom. His mom was murdered. He used his powers to go back in time and save her, creating this horrible alternate universe. Now he has to go back in time and fix it. It is a great story. It is so well told, and there's some great dynamics, especially with the Thomas Wayne character, because you've got Barry Allen telling him, your son lived. And it's that idea that Thomas Wayne is helping him, knowing he'll be erased from existence and die, but he'd rather erase himself from existence and die and save his son and let him live a life. It is a great story. It is worth watching. It is definitely an amazing film. Alright, so those are my top 10 DC animated films that did not star Batman or have his name in the title. If you have any ones I think I missed, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Otherwise, if you want to subscribe, hit the subscribe button, like the video, and I will see you next week because it is the Wednesday before Oscars, so we're going to talk some Oscars.